All right, thanks guys. Thanks Skookum for having me, and thanks for having these talks. I've been to a few and they've been fantastic, and so I'm really excited to have a chance to get up here and talk to you guys a little bit about an area that might be of interest to some of you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Juan Garzón, and I am a messaging strategist. That is to say, I help entrepreneurs and organizations craft clear and compelling stories that engage audiences and compel them to take action. So to a lot of developers, I'm a marketer. It's pretty simple. And one of the things that I wanted to come here and talk to you guys about is this idea of thinking beyond sort of the role or the bucket that you've been placed in. Now, I say this because I was the head of marketing for a global market research firm. And we worked a lot with technology, and technology always had a very sort of different way of doing things, a very different way of kind of looking at the world. And the rest of the company was very sort of sales and marketing oriented. And you know, I realized that a lot of that culture was very compartmental, and it's something that has kind of permeated into other companies and other organizations. And for a little while, I actually ran a group here called Freelance Charlotte. And one of the things that we did is when we had an event, we had everybody color code their tags with, they had 3 different colors: hackers, hustlers, and hipsters, right? So anybody that had anything to do with code was a hacker. Anybody who had anything to do with design or content creation was the hipster, and the hustlers were the marketers and the salespeople. So one of the thoughts that I had was that this sort of placing ourselves into these buckets makes you very myopic about the roles that the other people are doing, even if they're in your own organization. So for example, when I'm out and about and I see someone else and they say, hey, yeah, I'm a marketer, that doesn't really tell me much, right? I want to know, are you an inbound marketing expert? Are you a direct selling copy person? Are you an advertising? Are you on the analytics side? I mean, there's so much to the world of marketing that the word marketer alone doesn't really tell me much. But when people in that world talk to somebody who's maybe in your world, and you say, you know, whatever you say, they're going to say, oh, they're a developer, they're a coder, right? Whereas you guys, if you're a developer, you meet another person and they say, I'm a developer, that's probably not enough, right? You want to know, so do you specialize in Hadoop, or are you a Ruby developer, or you know, Cold Fusion, front end, back end, network administrator? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that happen in the world of technology, and that tells you a lot about what they do. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to, an idea that came about with some of the work that we did at my old company, and that I'm starting to see more and more, is this idea of crossover. And one of the biggest crossovers that I think can provide the most value is this idea of developers thinking like marketers. So bear with me if you will, I'm going to make the argument, and let's take a quick pulse here. How many of you developers think of yourselves as a marketer? Okay, so I'm hoping when I ask that question again at the end, more hands go up. So this whole idea of putting yourselves into buckets, like I said earlier, it's not just about seeing these different groups, but really kind of creating a bit of an animosity towards these different groups. And a lot of times, developers butt heads with marketers or salespeople. Right? So the salespeople are out there and they're talking, they're making all these promises to the customers, and the developers are really concerned with, you know, how the product works, the speed, the security, all of these things, and the sales guys are like, you know, promising a bill of goods that the developers aren't able to deliver on in the right time frame, and all of this. So I think that a lot of that could be prevented if you kind of get down to the basics of what marketing is all about. So for that, we're going to go back to school. Marketing 101. What is marketing? So let me ask you guys, how many of you have heard of the 4 Ps of marketing? A couple? Think back to like marketing, high school 101 class, something. All right, so anybody want to give it to me?
Product placement, position.
Okay, product, place,
Position.
position. Some people have added that as the 5th P. Price. One more, promotion. Most people, when they think of marketing, they think of promotion. They think of advertising, they think of getting users, getting people's attention, traffic, sales, all of that. That's what they think of when they think of marketing. But as you guys just said, there are 3 other pieces to marketing. So there occasionally are going to be a few people in technology. Maybe you're a developer or you have something to do with technology, and you're going to be in this space, right? So you're on the analytics side. You're working with metrics. You're working with driving traffic. And so maybe you have an understanding that even as a technologist, your responsibility is very marketing oriented. However, let's look at the first one, product, right? The development of the product is in and of itself a marketing function. And we'll talk a little bit about why it is, but this is typically the one that you start off with, right? It is product. The creation of your product or service as a solution to your audience's pain is a marketing function. How many of you guys are in the business of developing the product that you sell to your organization, to your clients? Whether it's software, website, an application, or even software as a solution to a problem. How many of you guys create that? Okay, so we've got a few more hands. You guys are in the business of creating the product, and that product creation and all of the information and all of the insights that go into that product creation, that is essentially the core of marketing, of effective marketing. Now, some of you guys who raised your hands, maybe you are on the software development side, but you're going to have a few web development people who say, well, I don't actually create the product that they're buying, right? We're just supporting the organization by creating an e-commerce platform, for example. Place. Place is about providing the product or service in a way that is convenient and accessible to your customers, to those end users. Back in the day, place is about product placement. It's where you place an item in a grocery store, for example. It's how accessible you make this, mail order catalogs. All of that is part of place, the place component of marketing. If you're a web developer and you are making a site more accessible, you're making more options available to your customers, you are making the entire experience something that a customer drives a customer to a sale, and you're doing all of that in the context of a business that has a storefront that is digital, which is what a lot of businesses are nowadays, right? That old brick and mortar store has been replaced by what you guys do, what you support, what you create. If that's the world that you live in, technologically speaking, this is the place in the marketing mix that you're in, right? So how many of you guys find yourselves in this place? Maybe web developers, web designers, anybody like that? Okay, so a couple. All right, and then we've got price. Now price is often dictated a little bit stronger by marketing, by management, and that has a lot to do with the customer research, understanding competitors in the market. But the sensitivity to cost, especially if any of you developers are freelancers or you work directly with customers, understanding what technology decisions you need to make because of a budget or because of the cost that they're trying to, the cost per acquisition or anything like that. Any kind of consideration for cost, not as directly as these two, but you start to get into this conversation of what is the core of marketing. So, back to school, back to the definition of what marketing is. A few of you now, we've raised a few more hands, are starting to might see that you fall into some of these areas of marketing. Does anybody know who this guy is? All right, so he is the father of management consulting. His name is Peter Drucker. And I kid you not, the guy is quoted in like every second sales deck in corporate America. So it's not corporate America technically, but I figured I'd throw him on here. Really, really smart guy. And he said that the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits them and sells itself. And honestly, I do a lot of consulting that is specific to marketing. When people start asking about, the secret of marketing, they concentrate on all of these different channels, but when it comes to like what really makes marketing work, it comes down to knowing the audience, knowing the customer, right? So copywriters, I know we got at least one copywriter here. The whole secret to copywriting is knowing your customer, knowing their pains, knowing the language that they use, and reflecting it back. This gets really fascinating because it starts to bleed into the way technology is moving today. And I'm going to get to the industry in just a second. But hopefully you can see here that if the whole core of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product fits them and sells itself, you see how it applies to these four. If you really know your customer, you're going to know what kind of product to build them. You're going to know what changes need to be made to that product, what options need to be made to that product. All that comes from knowing your customer. When you know your market, you know where pricing sort of fits in, right? What type of options they're looking for, what the pricing alternatives might be. When you know your customer, you know the way to push your sales or your products or services out to them in a way that is most convenient to them. So again, it's all about knowing your customer. And when it comes to promotion, same thing. You know your audience and you know what channels they're in, you know what language they use, you know what they respond to. It's all about knowing them, getting inside their heads. Does that sound familiar at all to anybody? Getting inside your customer's head so that you can do what you do better? How many UX people are out there? Okay. How many other people are influenced by UX or at least bring some of the principles of UX into the work that you do? Okay. That's the direction that it's going in. Now, it hasn't always been the case, and a lot of this is new. Back in the day, so we're going to talk a little bit about the industry. Back in the day, technology really was about just making it work. I mean, it was really sort of a bare bones, just get it working. I don't care if it's ugly. I don't care if it's complicated. It's just get it to work. And when it doesn't work, we'll call you. Right? Technology has changed. For a variety of reasons, people now, customers now, expect more. And now technology's role is really being all about the user. Your job is, as a technologist, as a developer, as a coder, it is to fight for the user. And hopefully in the companies that you're in, the organizations that you work with, you're starting to see the importance of this. Right? UX is still kind of a new thing, and it's this blend of design and development and technology. But at its core, it's all about understanding our audience, their pains, their needs, not just to create a product for them, but to create an entire experience for them. And that's what it's all about. And that's starting to trickle down all the way from just the regular, website experience, user experience, to the applications that they use, to now that we're getting into the Internet of Things. I mean, this brings a whole new world to thinking and understanding your customer and using technology to solve their pains, their needs, right? Using empathy, using what Peter Drucker said about knowing your audience to create products that are priced right and that are placed in a manner that is convenient to the customer. And then promotion is just communicating that to the audience, to that audience. So you guys who are in UX might recognize this. This is an empathy map. And some of you guys who aren't in UX, maybe you've run into these as well. And if not empathy mapping, persona development. Did any of you guys do that? Persona development or empathy mapping? A couple? Okay, more? If you don't do that now, I recommend that you do. Because the idea of the customer and your client's experience with whatever you are building, whatever you're supporting, whether it's the network that supports the application, whether it's the back end, the front end, the infrastructure, whatever it is, all of that affects the user, the customer, and ultimately is the core of whether or not they're going to do business with you. So we're seeing this in the world of UX and UI. The aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well. This is empathy, right? And even if you don't use empathy mapping and personas, do you guys hear the word empathy being used a little bit more often these days? Yeah? So there's another side of sort of the crossover mix that I call it. If UX is about design, right? design at its core, not just making things look nice, but design as a way to solve problems, and technology, there's another area of crossover here, and that is the technologist with the marketer, and what nowadays is called growth hacking. And if you look into growth hacking, I mean, it is extremely technical, but at its base, they understand that they are marketers first and foremost. And I was reading an article about sort of the ideal growth hacking team, and you've got an analytics expert, you've got a front-end expert, I mean, there's a bunch of technology components to it. And yet, at its core, it's all about driving the traffic. So these are technologists who understand that they're in the promotion bucket of the 4 Ps, but it's still, it's development, right? It's software. So these are all areas that in the industry, in the technology world, you're seeing a little bit more crossover. You're seeing the language of marketing starting to bleed into it. Anybody know this guy? This former Amazon guy. He wrote the book on Amazon's mandatory APIs usage. I read that. I don't know that much. And now he's at Google. His name is Steve Yeager. And Steve, if you watch this and I mispronounced your name, I'm sorry. Steve Yeager, I believe. This guy has been given some talks on sort of the future of technology, the future of development. And a few years ago, he had this quote: "If there is one thing I could teach every engineer, it would be how to market." And that's why. Because at its core, marketing is about knowing the user, knowing the customer, understanding the experience, understanding how whatever product, service, smart device that you're building fits in their world. And only by understanding that are you going to be able to compete and do the job that you do well. Then you need to understand the fundamentals of marketing. So, we went back to school and we talked about the definition of marketing, right? What is marketing? The 4 Ps. We talked about what's going on in the industry. And if you're still not sold on this idea, let's talk about money. Where is the money going nowadays? So what's interesting is that in the research you find now that marketing budgets are growing faster and are larger than IT budgets. Now that might not seem like that big of a deal until you realize that a lot of that money is technology money, IT money, right? So Gartner here said that by 2017 the CMO is going to spend more on IT than the CIO. Now this is for a variety of reasons, and one of them is that marketing is becoming more and more technology focused. That's just the future of marketing. But what does this mean about the guys who are not on the technology side, right? You're building software applications that are just a product, or you're viewing them as a product. This means that control and the way that you build things, you know, the person at the top of the food chain is changing. Even though you're doing the same job that you're doing, the person at the top is changing. This is actually an issue that I've got a client of mine. They're a technology project management firm, and this is the problem that they've run into. For 20 years, they've been calling on this guy, CIOs and CTOs, and they've been trying to sell them on these project management services. And now they realize that more and more they're being referred down to the next door over where the CMO is. And the reality is, when they go in there with the same story they've been using for 20 years, it doesn't work. CMOs speak a different language, right? They think about things differently. So as a result of that, as a messaging strategist, that's what I've been helping them with, is how do you define that message? How do you take that brand story so that when you walk into the CMO's office, you're actually prepared to have that conversation? So this is huge, okay? Because this is where the money is going. This is where the industry is going. And you know, as we talked about in the beginning, at its core, marketing is more and more of what you're doing. It falls under that definition of marketing. So, how do you become a better developer? My thought on that is learn to think like a marketer. I'm not saying you have to go back to school and get a marketing degree. I'm not saying you have to be an expert in every single channel, right? And all the new different sort of campaigns and social media and inbound and everything. Just understand the fundamentals of marketing. Right? Start with those 4 Ps. Start with empathy. Start with bringing that kind of thinking into the work that you do. And you will be more successful. I mean, the way the industry and the trends are going, that's where it's going. So if you want to advance, if you want to be able to work with your marketing people, having that fundamental understanding is going to go a long way. So I've got 5 recommendations on here. And I'm keeping this fairly brief because I want to have some Q&A after this. First, follow a marketing blogger or other influencer. If you are in a specific industry, try to follow trend makers and influencers in that industry, right? You're in healthcare, follow the marketing people who are kind of making some waves in healthcare. If you don't really know where to start, my recommendation is start with this guy. And the reason I like Seth Godin as a primer to marketing is because he doesn't use a lot of sort of marketing lingo, and his little blogs and tweets are very short. Has anybody here heard of him? So number 2, learn about your users and customers. And I'll be honest, I kind of expected when I said, does anybody use empathy mapping and all, and just because maybe a lot of the developers I hang out with tend to be UX oriented, that a lot more hands would raise up. So I'm glad that it didn't, because then this doesn't sound redundant. Learn about it. So I'm going to give you a link at the end, and I'm going to have a link to, I've got a page where I've got a link to Seth Godin's blog, and a link to a tool that you can use to create a very basic persona. So you can learn a little bit about how to do that. And there's a slight twist on the empathy map that I've done with the work that I do with my clients. It's called an audience insight map, and then you can download it as well, and I'll give you a link to that here in a minute. So learn about your users is about learning to use those tools, learning to have those conversations when you're talking about, you know, the work that you do. What is the customer experiencing? What do they really want, right? What are those underlying pains and needs? But I'm going to challenge you guys to take it one step further and do the same thing with your customer. Because I'm assuming that for most of you, the user is not always the same as the customer, right? So the customer, say at Skookum, is the company that comes in here and says, I want you guys to build something. The user is the one who's building whatever it is that you guys create. A big part of the work that I do, and usually when I tell people I did brand strategy and sales communications for a global market research firm, they're like, what is sales communications? Sales communications is about applying the same exact process, right, that design thinkers and UX people do, of empathy mapping and all that. Apply it to the customer, right? Treat your sales process like a project. And walk, you know, what is my customer thinking when they walk in the door? We actually had a project with an energy management company, pretty innovative energy management company. And their whole thing was, our customer is the CEO. And we kind of walked through the entire process and realized that even though the CEO has to sign on the projects that they did, the real key influencer, and really the one who made the decision, was the facilities manager, because they sell it's like an automation, energy automation system. The facilities manager was the one who, if he said no, CEO didn't sign off on it. If he says yes, they did. And we really dug deep into what does this facility manager do. And to give you an example, this is what it looked like. We learned that most facilities managers have a background in HVAC. Right? So these are guys who roll up their sleeves and are used to kind of fixing things with their own hands. Facilities management is usually the first level where they are sitting behind a desk. And so they get frustrated that they can't like go out and fix a problem, that they just have to manage everything. And facilities managers is the kind of job that if you do it wrong, everybody notices, right? Something burns up, something goes bad. And if you do it right, nobody notices. And their ultimate goal was to accelerate, right? Move up the food chain. And they had a hard time doing that because when they sat at the board table, they felt like they weren't contributing to the bottom line. They were just keeping things going. So what did we find is that the way to make the sale is to have that conversation where we're talking to the facilities manager about empowering them to contribute to the bottom line. Really short example, but that's when you apply that kind of user empathy thinking to the sales process. So I'm not saying you have to do all of that, but start thinking about the customer in that way. Number 3, share what you find with sales and marketing. So if you want to learn about your customer, hopefully you guys are talking to your sales and marketing people. And you're saying, what are they saying, right? What are they doing? What are they complaining about? But this can go the other way, right? I don't know if the size of the companies that you guys work with, but if you're able to sort of set aside some time to sit down with sales and marketing, ask them questions, learn about the things that, that they're dealing with the customers, with the users, but also, if you guys find any insights from the work that you do, give it back, right? Let marketers know, hey, we've spent a whole portion of this project just working on this, and it adds this extra layer of security, and this is a really good thing because of XYZ reason. That's something that the salesperson or a marketing person can use. So have that interaction, have that communication. You guys are on the same page. And I think that's one of the things that has really changed, right, historically in the industry is we are all on the same page. I think early on, technologists, like I said, it was all about, I don't really understand what you do, right? I'm a CEO, I don't understand what you do, you just get it done, just keep it up. I'm going to yell at you if it doesn't. And what's changed now is that the business's goals are your goals, right? Sales and marketing has understood that for a while. Without customers, they're out of a job. But now, without those customers, you're out of a job. And it's more competitive. So being able to get on the same page with sales and marketing, I think could be very valuable. Number 4, share your thinking with the world. So this is a little different, but if you want to write a blog, if you want to have a little podcast, do some speaking, if you're able to get out there and share your process, the way you think about your projects, you're demonstrating the value of what it is that you do. Because the reality is, no matter how much persona development and empathy mapping and everything that you do behind the scenes, a lot of times in technology, the customer doesn't fully appreciate it. Right? They don't know all the work that it took. They just, wow, it looks great. It works. So the more you're able to sort of share your thinking and kind of get out there, the more people are going to recognize you, especially if you use human language. They're going to recognize you and the value that you provide. As well as if you're blogging for projects that you're doing for your company, I mean, that's a great marketing tool right there. If you're a company like Skookum, have some of your developers, you know, blog and be open about the projects you work on. But this also applies for your side projects. How many of you guys have side projects? Most developers I meet have a side project or two. So write about that, right? Share about that. Talk about the thinking that you did, right? And I don't just mean just share sort of the code and, hey, you found this sort of shortcut in JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, really think of, look, I did all of this work because I heard this, right? Try to think of it a little bit that way. And lastly, and it's kind of the big one, kind of overlays, you know, these others, it's to learn to explain why your code matters. Right? Because a lot of the work that you do, it does matter, and it does make a difference. And sometimes the problem between, you know, being able to get that project or to demand the type of fees that this is worth really just come down to being able to explain why it matters. Because at the end of the day, the customer, you know, might not care about the technical reason that you're giving them. But if you're able to understand the user, where they're coming from, right, the market, if you're able to think a little bit like a marketer, this becomes a lot easier. And when you're able to do this, you can make the leap from employee or freelancer to business owner, right? Or, I mean, if you don't want to go that route, to project manager or development lead or something where you're able to, this ability to communicate why what you do matters is really the key. And that requires thinking like a marketer. So, if you go to juangarzon.com/skookum, hopefully that's really easy to remember, but you can write it down. It's my name with Skookum at the end. There's a page right there that's got a link to Seth Godin's blog. You can download an audience insight map, and it's a link to it's a web-based persona development thing. It's really cool. I think it's called Persona App or something like that. So it's on there. So thank you guys for listening, and I'll take any kind of Q&A or questions or comments. Anybody got a question, comment, story?
Yeah, on your second point, how often do you find that your research about user needs and the customer's perception of user needs has a gap, and then how would you close that gap, like with sales, and to lay the foundation for a good acceptance of what you do?
So for a lot of this type of work, you have to get buy-in. And a big way to get buy-in is to bring them in on the process. Now, this might not be possible at a developer level. This is really at a company level. But if you bring the client in on the process, and you're able to kind of get that buy-in, it really makes a big difference. I started consulting 2 years, right? So left corporate, started consulting, and one of the big things that I started doing, working on brand and sales comm projects, was I'm going to go off and do my research, and I'm going to come back to you with a big report, and this is, all the great stuff. And I mean, the report explained everything. And they're still like, okay, that doesn't justify what you just charged me, right? You just came up with a name, or you just kind of helped with this storyline. And so what I started to do is switch that to doing workshops. So now when I have a client, I get the leadership, we all get in a room, and I do empathy mapping, right? I do it from a messaging perspective. But we get empathy mapping, and I'm like, all right, let's kind of get stuff out of your head, and we do sticky notes, and you got the CEO over here with the sales director over here, and everybody starts collaborating, and once they start to do that, they're bought in because they created it, right? And at the end, we've got the conclusions. All right, based on what we worked on today, this is the persona, this is the pains, gains, this is what we're trying to do. Does everybody agree? And everyone's like, oh yeah, right? They've been working all day on it. Then it works.
So instead of you doing it, you guide them to do it.
You have to bring them in somehow. Right. Depending on the nature of the project, maybe it's bring them in snippets, maybe it's a workshop up front, a workshop at the end. If it's a small project, just talking them through the process that you go through. That's why blogging and speaking and things like that help. It opens up, it offers insights into, oh wow, there is a little bit more to what he's doing, right? So that's what I would recommend. Yes.
How do you understand your user if you're at like an enterprise level? Let's say work at Duke Energy, so pretty much everyone is a user of the website. They may not choose to be, but they are anyway.
Right.
So how would you go about understanding your user in that?
So at the enterprise level, and again, there are some things that you need to do with buy-in from leadership, right? That as a developer, as sort of a cog in the wheel, it's really hard for you to kind of bring this kind of thinking out there. There's so much out there for understanding users. Entire market research firms that specialize in doing eye tracking for how they're visiting the website and looking at metrics. I've got a buddy of mine who gets so deep into Google Analytics just to understand, right? They spend a couple seconds extra here, so let's move this button over here, and really kind of get deep. But as long as you know who your user is, so Duke Energy, everybody uses the website. Yeah, but really, who is it? Is it are there certain people who use it more often than others? Are there certain people who come on for certain reasons? And then you kind of put them into buckets, into categories, and then maybe you've got the stay-at-home mom, busy household to run, she pays the bills. Or then you've got the 2 working professionals, no kids, they kind of alternate. Whatever those kind of buckets are, and sort of do a little exercise with other people. One of the things that is really important about this whole persona and audience insight development is don't do it alone. Because what's in your head is again, it's that sort of focus group of one, and it tends to be very myopic. You've got your own preconceived notions. So whether it's other colleagues, coworkers, or some friends, and talk about what's the context of using this website. Do you sit down and you do a bunch of bills together? Do you log on from your phone? Like, what's that like? So it's kind of hard at the enterprise level, and there's other people who could probably speak to that better than I can, but it's just a thought.
We're just going to expand on that from the enterprise level. What's really important about persona development being able to, so maybe everybody's coming to the site to do the same thing, right? You might have different levels of experience with technology, or somebody, or age either plays a big factor into it. Like they want to do something really quick, just want to be there for that, and that helps you to understand when you have those different persona sets, how you can best create applications or market a way a process works on the website. So yeah, even if everybody's coming there to do kind of the same thing, you have so many different subsets of users that are trying to, like maybe somebody likes to really dig into the bill, right? And some people don't even care about that. So that's where you can kind of set out and segment your users.
Just last night, I was at an event over here at, I think I can talk about it, the Charlotte Observer. They had like a design thinking boot camp by the parent company. And they had all these people fly in from all these different newspapers, right? And so who reads these newspapers? You could say, well, anybody. I mean, there's different markets. And they had these sort of design thinking workshops, and these people would go out in teams and just go out into the street. And they would just go stop people and say, hey, do you, they were talking about different things, but you're just stopping people on the street and kind of getting some, quick impromptu thoughts. The key thing there is you might think you know what the user wants, but once you hear an actual user giving it to you, the language they use is awesome. It's insightful, right? When we do persona mapping, one of the quadrants of the persona development, of the empathy map development is what they say. It's what they think, what they do, what they feel, what they say. And what they say is actually their words. It's quotes. And so you always, whether through customer research surveys or going out and getting it in the field, you actually get the words that they say. That's amazingly insightful.
On this also, that idea you shared with us previous time about eavesdropping online, is that also relevant?
Yeah, so finding out where your customers, your users are already talking is sort of a great way to actually get their language. And so one of them is complaint sites. Look at all the people who find a site where, I don't know, DukeEnergySucks.com or something like that. I'm sure it exists. No offense to Duke Energy, there's like one for everything. You go on there, see what they're complaining about. I was on hold for this long and I went to the website and I couldn't find this. Oh, interesting, right? So in market research, we called that eavesdropping. If you want to build a product, go to Amazon and look at reviews of your competitors' products, see what they're complaining about. If you want to have a business idea, go look at Amazon. Amazon's a big one. Go look at Amazon, find business books on that idea, and see what people are complaining about. So that gives you language and it gives you ideas of what they're saying and thinking. Anybody else?
With this sort of change in the way the money is flowing to technology, what types of firms, business opportunities do you see coming out of this?
Well, I mean, that's a complicated conversation from the marketing side, and a lot of that has to do with the nature of agencies. It's really not about specific products or services or new firms that need to offer that. It really has to do with understanding how to communicate. There's going to be more people who do what I do. Let's put it that way. Because, again, you guys could be doing the exact same thing that you're doing. You just have to speak a different language. You have to speak the language of marketing when it comes to technology as opposed to the language of CIO, CTO. So it's really about making that shift. Some people will make that shift. They will be successful. New services will come from that. Some people won't, and they'll be stuck where they are.
As an enterprise sales and marketing software developer, I mean that one insight I just want to. That's the Gartner insight you had out there.
Yep.
That's exactly what we are seeing here.
Awesome.
So that's a great insight. To really
validation.
It is to you from being in that space, But as a follow-up to somebody was asking about people may be familiar with the A/B testing. That's a cheap way of figuring out. Just throw half a dozen different kind of landing pages out there. See which one is getting more traction and that kind of. That's a cheap and
and I mean.
But to your insight, that's I can directly speak to from
great.
experience.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing.
Sure. With growth hacking, that's a lot of it is A/B testing. But I think one of the keys, and I think this comes back to the whole, think like a marketer, is there's a lot of people who talk about A/B testing and get into A/B testing for a variety of reasons. A/B testing without knowing the why is almost a different animal, right? Let's try this, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. But understanding why. Why are people responding to this and not to this? And getting into that, that's where you get insights. And insights is where the value is. And that could change the entire paradigm of what you're building instead of just a green button instead of an orange button. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the difference in approach that you use for a new product where the need is not, maybe the user doesn't even understand that they need something completely innovative. And I think that the approach needs to change, or it has to be different compared to something where the user can actually tell you, oh, these are my problems, these are my needs, this is what I'm experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving them something that's completely new, then how would you change your approach?
Sure. So some of you guys might know me from Pitch Breakfast, Startup Weekend, RevTech, UC FinTech. I work a lot with startup companies. I work a lot with technology companies, and a lot of that is because they need sometimes help with the messaging, right? You get so kind of involved in the technology that you forget to speak the language of the customer. In the startup community, in the world of innovating new products and services, you get that a lot. This is totally new. How do you even begin to kind of do this? And it all comes back to knowing your customer, knowing what they want, and not asking them what they want, but understanding what they want through, I can go into a whole nother conversation about sort of where innovation comes from, but I'll give you an example. Ford, the car, totally innovative, right? And he has a quote, Henry Ford has a quote where he says that if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses, right? People don't know what they want, right? That's why Apple says, we don't use market research, right? We build something that you didn't even know you wanted, but now you have to have it. The truth is, they do a lot of market research, but they just don't do surveys. They don't ask people what they want, right? They use more of a design thinking approach. So when you understand what the user really wants, so in the case of transportation, right? What sucks about a horse? You got to feed it. They die. You got to change the shoes, right? They only go a certain miles. They don't go that fast. I mean, these are all the things that suck about a horse.
New York City has a major poop problem.
Poop problem, right?
The reason they put brownstones with the steps going up is because in the rain there's so much accumulation of manure that
I hope everybody ate their pizza already before you kind of heard that. Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of issues that just sucked about having a horse. People can't imagine something better than that. He introduced something better than that as a device, as a tool that solved all those problems. So, I mean, that was where the innovation came from. It's also where his marketing came from. Does that answer your question? Or I can go deeper down that road.
No.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Thanks, guys.